It was a quiet evening, just like any other. The city buzzed with the usual rhythm, cars honking, pedestrians lost in their own worlds, the distant chatter of people enjoying a warm summer night. I had just finished my coffee at a small cafe on the corner, taking my time as I strolled down the street. The courthouse was just a few blocks away, a place I once walked into every morning with a sense of duty. Now, retired, I found solace in these evening walks, watching the world move around me without the weight of the gavel in my hands. I adjusted my coat and checked my watch. 8:15 p.m. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. That was until I felt it, that unmistakable feeling of being watched. I had spent years in courtrooms, analyzing body language, understanding human behavior, and right now I could tell someone had their eyes locked on me. I glanced sideways and sure enough, there he was, a young police officer standing near his patrol car. His stance was rigid, his gaze sharp, like a predator sizing up its prey. I kept walking, refusing to let it bother me. I had seen this too many times before, but then the radio crackled. I didn't hear everything, just fragments. Suspicious behavior, black male, possibly armed. A bitter smile touched my lips. I knew where this was going. Before I could take another step, the officer moved. "Hey, you there!" I stopped, slowly turning to face him. He was already gripping his belt where his handcuffs and gun rested. His expression wasn't one of curiosity, it was one of suspicion. "Can I help you, officer?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Yeah, you mind telling me what you're doing around here?" I exhaled, meeting his gaze. "Walking home." He studied me, his eyes scanning my face, my clothes. I could almost hear the thoughts racing through his mind. He didn't see an old man enjoying an evening walk. He saw something else, something threatening, and I knew this was just the beginning. The officer took a step closer, his hand still resting near his holster. His stance was firm, controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't just asking questions, he was looking for something, some reason to escalate this. "Where exactly are you coming from?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. I sighed. "A cafe, just a few blocks down. I come here often." "Got any ID on you?" I reached for my wallet, moving slowly, deliberately. Years of experience had taught me how quickly situations like this could spiral out of control. The wrong movement, the wrong expression. It didn't take much. I handed him my ID, and he snatched it away, studying it. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He expected something different. Maybe a fake name, maybe an excuse. But he wasn't satisfied. "What were you doing at the cafe?" I let out a short breath. "Drinking coffee." His jaw tightened. He didn't like my tone. "You live around here?" "Yes." "Where?" I pointed down the street. 3 blocks that way. He glanced in the direction I pointed, but made no move to confirm it. Instead, he tilted his head, still not convinced. "See, the thing is," he said, flipping my ID between his fingers, "we got a call about a suspicious person matching your description. Someone pacing up and down, looking into cars." I chuckled softly. "You mean walking?" His eyes darkened. "You think this is funny?" "No, officer," I said, my voice steady. "I think this is predictable." For a second, he just stared at me. Then something shifted in his expression. Maybe it was frustration, maybe it was ego. Either way, he made his decision. "Turn around, hands behind your back." I didn't move. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're being detained for suspicious behavior. We can sort this out at the station." I felt a cold wave of anger rise in me, but I pushed it down. I had seen this happen to others. Now it was happening to me. I exhaled and calmly said, "Officer, I suggest you take a closer look at that ID before you make a mistake you'll regret." But he wasn't listening. He had already grabbed his cuffs. The cold steel of the handcuffs brushed against my wrist as the officer yanked my arms behind my back. I didn't resist. I knew better. But the weight of the moment settled over me like a heavy fog. I had spent decades upholding the law, ensuring justice was served. And now I was standing here, accused of nothing but existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The officer muttered something into his radio, glancing around as if waiting for backup. Pedestrians slowed their pace, eyes darting toward us with a mix of curiosity and unease. Some shook their heads, others just kept walking. I had seen this scene play out too many times before. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice calm but firm. He scoffed, tightening his grip on my wrist. "Yeah? And why's that?" I turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. "Because I know the law better than you do." The arrogance in his face faltered, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "Oh yeah? And what, you some kind of lawyer?" "Close," I said. "Try retired judge." For the first time since stopping me, I saw something shift in his expression. It was quick, a flicker of doubt, confusion, but it was there. He hesitated just for a second before laughing under his breath. "Nice try," he said, shaking his head. "That's a good one." I exhaled slowly. "Check my ID again." He rolled his eyes but glanced down at the card in his hand. I watched as he actually read the name this time. His lips moved slightly, processing the information, but his grip on my wrist didn't loosen. "Judge Henry Lawson," I said, completing the thought for him. "Appointed to the state bench in 1995. Served 23 years, presided over more trials than you've written tickets, and now retired." He blinked, his fingers twitched around my ID. A long silence stretched between us. His breathing had changed, shallower now. His fingers loosened slightly on my wrist, uncertainty creeping in. He wasn't sure what to do next. "I'd suggest you let me go," I said, my voice steady, "before you add wrongful detainment to your record." His jaw clenched. He was still holding on to his authority, still trying to justify his actions. I could see the internal battle, his ego wrestling with the reality of what he had just done. Before he could speak, the radio at his shoulder crackled again. A voice came through, sharp, commanding. "Unit 12, status update on the suspicious person?" He hesitated before pressing the button. His voice wasn't as firm this time. We're just verifying ID." More silence. Then another voice, deeper, more authoritative. "Unit 12, what's the name on that ID?" The officer swallowed. He looked at me, then back at the ID in his hand. His confidence was slipping. "Judge Henry Lawson," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The radio went quiet for a moment. Then a sharp reply. "Release him, immediately." His shoulders tensed. His hand hovered near my wrist for another second before, finally, he let go. The cuffs didn't even make it all the way around my wrists before he pulled them back. I rolled my shoulders, rubbing my wrist where the metal had pressed against my skin. The officer took a step back. His entire demeanor shifted. "Sir, I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. He shut his mouth. I could see it in his face. His pride was bruised, his authority shaken. He had been so sure of his judgment, so quick to act, and now he was standing in front of a man he had wrongly detained. A man who had once worn the robe and commanded the courtroom he probably dreaded stepping into. "I'm sure you thought you were doing your job," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But your job isn't to assume. Your job isn't to judge before you know the facts. You let your bias lead you to this moment." He looked away, shame flickering in his eyes. Another police car pulled up. A senior officer stepped out, glancing between the two of us before fixing his eyes on the young officer. "Are you out of your damn mind?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea who this is?" The young officer stammered. I didn't know, sir. He fit the description." "Of what? A man walking down the street?" The senior officer shook his head before turning to me. "Judge Lawson, I deeply apologize for this. I'll be filing a full report on this incident." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "See that you do." The young officer stood there, silent, his face pale. I didn't need to say anything else. The weight of his mistake was already settling on his shoulders. I took my ID back, slipping it into my pocket before turning away. My walk home was only a few blocks, but tonight it felt longer. As I walked away, I could still feel the weight of the moment lingering in the air. The young officer stood frozen, probably replaying everything in his head, realizing how close he had come to ruining his own career over nothing more than an assumption. The senior officer was already on his radio, his tone sharp, likely preparing to file the necessary paperwork. But for me, this wasn't about paperwork. This was about something much bigger, something that had been happening long before this officer ever put on his badge. Bias, assumptions, judgment before understanding. I had seen it in courtrooms, in the faces of defendants who never had a fair chance. I had seen it in the way certain cases were handled, the way some people were given the benefit of the doubt, while others were treated as criminals before they even spoke. And tonight, I had experienced it firsthand, again. Even after years on the bench, after dedicating my life to upholding justice, I was still just another suspicious man in the wrong place at the wrong time. The thought didn't make me angry anymore, just tired. As I reached my doorstep, I paused, looking back down the street. The police cars were still there, red and blue lights reflecting off the pavement. The city moved on, unaware of the small battle that had just played out. A battle not just between a cop and a retired judge, but between ignorance and awareness. I wondered if that young officer would think twice the next time he saw someone who fit the description. I wondered if this moment would stay with him, if it would force him to question his instincts, to challenge the quiet prejudices that had been ingrained in him long before he ever wore a uniform. I hoped so, because justice doesn't begin in the courtroom. It begins in the way we see each other, in the choices we make before we even speak, in the decision to pause, to question our own assumptions before we act. And maybe, just maybe, tonight had been his first real lesson.